The Day of the Dead, or Día de los Muertos, is an ever-evolving holiday that traces its earliest roots to the Aztec Empire. While Halloween has its origins in Christian tradition, Day of the Dead has indigenous roots. The Aztecs used skulls to honor the dead a millennium before the Day of Dead celebrations emerged. Skulls, like the ones once placed on Aztec temples, is just the beginning of the dark origins of Día de los Muertos. According to colonial period records, the Aztec Empire was formed in 1427 CE, only about a century before the arrival of Spanish conquistadors. When the Spanish arrived in central Mexico 500 years ago, the region had millions of indigenous inhabitants. The conquistadors largely characterized them as Aztecs because, at the time, they were united under the expansive Aztec Empire. But the celebration that Mexicans now call Día de los Muertos almost certainly existed many centuries earlier, perhaps originating with the Toltec people of central Mexico. When the Spanish conquistadors invaded in 1519, the Aztecs recognized a wide pantheon of gods, which included a goddess of death and the underworld named Mictlacihuatl. She was celebrated throughout the entire 9th month of the Aztec calendar, a 20-day month that corresponded roughly to late July and early August. The Aztecs appeased these fearsome underworld gods by burying their dead with food and precious objects. Mictlacihuatl, who is often depicted with flayed skin and a gaping skeletal jaw, was linked to both death and resurrection. Unlike the Mayan civilization, the Aztec culture did not have a highly sophisticated system of written language, but instead relied on a system of logographic symbols combined with phonetic syllable signs that probably came into use during Spanish colonial occupation. Our understanding of the mythology of the Mayans comes from the scholarly interpretation of these symbols, combined with accounts made in early colonial times. And many of these customs have been passed along for centuries with surprisingly few changes. Modern Day of Dead celebrations would likely be fairly familiar to Aztecs. Fairly elaborate stories surround Mictlacihuatl's husband, but fewer about her specifically. It was believed that she was born and sacrificed as an infant, then became the mate of her husband. Together, these rulers of the Mictlan had power over all three types of souls dwelling in the underworld: those who died normal deaths, heroic deaths, and non-heroic deaths. In one version of the myth, Mictlacihuatl and her husband are thought to have served a role in collecting the bones of the dead so that they could be collected by other gods, returned to the land of the living where they could be restored to allow the creation of new races. The fact that many races exist is because the bones were dropped and mixed together before they made their way back to the land of the living for the use by the gods of creation. The worldly goods buried with the newly dead were intended as offerings to Mictlacihuatl and her husband to ensure their safety in the underworld. Archaeologists and historians know relatively little about the details of the month-long celebration of Mictlacihuatl, but say it likely involved burning incense, song and dance, then blood sacrifice, customary practices in many Aztec rituals. The Spanish invaders of Mexico were Catholic, and they worked hard to evangelize native peoples. To stamp out lingering indigenous beliefs, they demolished religious temples, burned indigenous idols, and destroyed Aztec books. But indigenous people in Mexico, as across the Americas, resisted Spanish efforts to eradicate their culture. Instead, they often blended their own religious and cultural practices with those imposed on them by the Spanish. A calavera, Day of the Dead skeleton, all dressed up for that afterlife party, perhaps the best-known symbol of the ethnic and cultural mixing that defines modern Mexico in La Virgen de Guadalupe, a uniquely Mexican Virgin Mary. Many Mexican Catholics believed that in 1531, the Virgin appeared to Juan Diego, an indigenous Mexican farmer, and in his native language of Nahuatl, told him to build a shrine to her. Today, the Basilica of Our Lady of Guadalupe in Mexico City is among the world's most visited holy sites. Spanish conquerors faced difficulty in convincing native peoples to give up their rituals honoring the death goddess Mictlacihuatl. The compromise was to move these indigenous festivities from late July to early November to correspond with All Hallow Tide, the 3-day Christian observance of All Saints' Eve, All Saints' Day, and All Souls' Day. With this move, the holiday was connected to Catholicism, but many practices and beliefs associated with the worship of the dead remained deeply indigenous. Contemporary Day of the Dead rituals were featured prominently in the 2017 Disney Pixar film Coco. These included homemade sugar skulls, decorated home altars, the fantastical spirit animals, and images of Calaveras skeletons enjoying the afterlife in their finest regalia. The use of Mexican marigolds to adorn altars and graves on Day of the Dead probably had indigenous origins. Called cempasúchil by the Aztecs, the vibrant Mexican marigold grows during the fall. According to myth, the sweet smell of these flowers awaken the dead. The elaborately decorated shrines to deceased loved ones, which usually contain offerings for the dead, may also have pre-Hispanic origins. Many indigenous peoples across Mesoamerica had altars in their houses or patios. They were used to perform household rituals, worship gods, and communicate with ancestors. But here's the dark truth of our past. The bones, skulls, and skeletons that are so iconic of the Day of the Dead are fundamentally indigenous too. Many Aztec gods were depicted as skeletal. Other deities wore bones as clothing or jewelry. The Aztecs, who engaged in ritual human sacrifice, even used human bones to make musical instruments. The Aztec capital city of Tenochtitlan had a large bone rack that stored thousands of human skulls. And when Aztec commoners buried deceased family members under their own houses to keep them close, Mictlantecuhtli became the formidable guardian of their bones. The Spanish conquerors may have claimed to bring Christianity to the New World, but in their attempt to convert the Aztecs, they ended up compromising the very essence of their Christian monotheistic faith with pagan rituals and ceremonies of the dead. And while we've come a long way from offering real bones and human sacrifice to painting skulls and lighting candles, it does make you wonder, are there still some who celebrate Día de los Muertos in its original form? Far from the light, deep in the shadows, where the goddess of death, Mictlantecuhtli, still waits.